Bone, 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 her falling feet call. Bones, 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 that which is lost or losing its form. The bones, the bones, the bones hold the holy structure of the thing. The bones, the bones, the bones, when she finds them, she will sing. Her eyes are crowded by timelines and slip from searching in sunlight, in mood, through twilight, through stormlight, through rain. She knows a bone when she finds one. She knows a piece of the elusive whole when she finds it, as she scans desert sands and sea bottoms, craggy mountains and forests. She knows. She knows when she finds the right bones, the pieces of the puzzle that make up the whole. She searches in therapist rooms, in drunken dance halls, under the trees, beneath the bridges, on park benches at the silent crossroads. She reaches into the city centres, into the apartment towers, posed and more imposing, into suburban cul-de-sacs, closed and more enclosing. She's in the ghettos, on the edges, in those dark places in between. She seeks beneath the streets through the sewage of our dreams. She will find the pieces and then begin to sing. That poem is about La Loba. It's a poem I wrote for a performance that I did with a dear friend. In this performance we invoked La Loba, and I feel that La Loba is the spirit of my bone oracle. I love bones. I collect bones. There's something about them that's always intrigued me. And as I began to gather them, people began to bring them to me and gift them to me. And the more bones I began to have in my possession, eventually something stirred in me, this idea of a bone oracle. It was born through lots of little things feeding in, little things weaving together. And it was on a very auspicious feeling day that I decided to gather various little bones from around my space, my studio and my home, and put them together and begin my bone oracle. I live in England, and this day was a few days after there had been a dust storm in Spain, and the light was very strange here. It was yellowy. It felt cozy and warm, but it also felt otherworldly and strange. There was odd winds, and it was a very, very interesting day. That weekend my lover had come to stay, and he'd been with me for the entire weekend, so I was very blissed out when I was saying goodbye to him. And you know how lovers' goodbyes can be very long. So we were outside for quite a while, and a heron, I live near a river, there's a river near my home, but I've never seen a heron before or since up here. And a heron sat on a roof very near us, right next to us, watching us say goodbye to one another. And then as my partner drove off, 2 ravens followed his car down the driveway. My partner is deeply connected to the runes and is an oracle man in that sense. But also his connection to the runes is also about self-help in the deepest possible sense of the word. And so the heron and the ravens confirmed my idea that I should gather my bone oracle on that day. So I gathered pieces. And the hedgehog jaw is the first piece that I was ever given to be part of my bone oracle. But I felt that what I was doing was remembering something. So I was going back into a deep past, into a memory that was in my body. But I also wanted to research and find out what the cultural history is around bone oracles. So I looked up Sangoma, the Africans, and I also found some modern bone oracle readers and saw about how they did what they were doing. So I wanted to honour those who have made bone oracles before and who are still making bone oracles now, but I also wanted to find my own way because I felt like I was remembering something very deep, very old for me. If you talk in terms of past lives, a prehistoric cave woman, shaman, these are terms that aren't necessarily fitting for that era, but that kind of thing, memory within me. And so I trusted my instinct a lot, as well as doing my research. And you'll see how my bone oracle works and how I devised it. And it's still a work in progress, and people are still giving me bones, and I still find bones, and I have to contemplate whether they need to be part of the oracle. So it's an ongoing process. And if you are doing bone oracle yourself, I encourage you to be very intuitive with it. So this video is just going to explain in simple terms how I use my bone oracle and introduce you to each of the bones. But I'll be doing a video on each bone and its meaning following on from this video. So I hope you enjoy. So this is the cloth I use for throwing. These are obviously the bones, so just move them so that you can see the cloth properly. What's painted on here is very simple. There is a dot at the centre and just a series of concentric circles, like when you drop a pebble in water and it makes concentric circles. And this is painted on here with oak gall ink because I like to do things naturally, and I made the oak gall ink myself. These circles represent different things depending on the question that the querent is asking. But in simple terms, and if you wanted to do a general life reading, I have this as the person's soul center. And this is their soul journey within the context of their question. And then this space represents their human journey. This next section represents family, and things that are affecting you by, friends and family and interactions like that. Further out we get into ancestry and past and earth and the larger things, and then the larger circle even further out is the grander kind of scheme of things. Now it's not drawn on here, but this cloth is also divided this way and this way, and again, depending on the question, depending on the kind of answer we're looking for, I think of this as the earth, air, fire and water sections. I also think of this as the manifest, this is the unmanifest, this is the conscious, this is the unconscious. It really depends on the question. And the thing about bone reading and how it is different to other oracles is that, you can have pieces touching each other. You can have something leading to something else, and they will seem to make pictures or pathways or messages, or sometimes you might have something hidden under something else, and then I tend to look at where it is within the circle, how it relates to all the other pieces. Something I often do before I do a reading is ask to have a guardian of the reading. What I've placed here just for demonstrative purposes, but is often the skull that I use is a fox skull, and that's because fox is one of my totem animals, and fox is very good at winding ways and finding pathways. And often that's what querents are looking for. They're looking for a way through something or information around something. So sniffing something out, hunting something down is often what we're doing when we do a reading. So what I tend to do is gather all the bones in my hand, and the more bones I get, the harder this gets to do. And I would only ever do this on a soft surface, because some of the bones in here are incredibly fragile or incredibly old, and there are harder, heavier pieces in. So I tend to put them all in my hand, lift them all up, focus on the querent question, and then throw them down and see how they land. Some of the pieces will land outside of the circle, and obviously the others will land in various places. So, say for example, these pieces have landed outside, so I would discard those pieces in the throw. And what remains is the message. And the process then comes for us to interpret this message. And each bone obviously represents a different thing, and the way that they're connected to each other, and how they might move from one sphere to another, how they might be pointing inwards to a sphere. For example, this obviously isn't a real throw, but this is a snake bone, and it's pointing from a hedgehog jawbone. And this little collection of things here, this is a skull that's been carved from mammoth ivory. This is a fossil. It's curving from this information, it's curving inwards, and it's pointing into what the human part of the sphere. It's in the earth section of the cloth, so it's manifest, and it's connected to earth things that can be related to body, to things that are actually happening. It really does depend on the question. They're pointing in. This reading, if this was a real reading, this person has nothing in their center, and not very much directly in their soul path. Either they're not conscious of it, or they have very little work to do in this space at the moment, and all the work is in the human sphere out of here. So this part would be to read and interpret how each bone connects. Future videos are going to be about each individual bone and what it means. And then maybe I'll do a few videos with throws. Once I've done all the videos about each individual bone or piece, I'll do videos about, I'll do some throws, and then we can interpret some throws, or maybe through Hecate's helper group we can do some throws and do some readings for each other. Now, all these pieces have a meaning to me, but sometimes new pieces come. For example, I was recently gifted these pieces that will go in the bone oracle. This is salmon jaw, this is a vertebrae from a river otter, and this is a piece of turtle bone. Now before I put these into the oracle, I would get to know each bone individually by meditating with it and doing research about the animal, literally just watching nature documentaries, and also just feeling into what they mean before I add them to the set. I'll go through each piece for you in brief, because I'm going to do a video about each piece in a bit more depth. This is a buzzard bone, very long, far-seeing. This is a piece of coral. This is a sheep's toe bone. This is a rabbit's hip bone. This is a little piece of sea-worn pottery, which for me represents the masculine. It pairs with this piece, which is a cowrie shell, representing the feminine. This piece is a copper oak leaf made myself from precious metal clay. It represents our connection to nature. This also is a sheep's toe bone. There are many bones that pair in my set. This is also a rabbit bone, which pairs with the hip bone here. This is a crocodile tooth. This is a pyrite fossil. A badger tooth. An ancient fossilized cave bear bone. A piece from inside a watch. A hagstone. For the weird. My set didn't feel complete until that piece was in there, and it didn't come till a bit later. This is a key representing secrets and doors opening. Again, I have another pairing here. So these are two snake rib bones, and as you can see, this one, the snake was injured whilst it was alive and its bone healed. These are two sides of one thing. I'll explain them in an individual. A quartz crystal. A fox tooth. And a little tiny gypsy bell. Another piece I made myself from copper. This is sea urchin. A second fox tooth. One of my favourite pieces in the whole set. This is a mole skull. I have many mole bones. Moles come to me often. They represent for me shadow work, digging in the soil. And the pair that goes with that is this exquisite bone, which I also love. This is a mole shoulder bone. They are amazingly complex little bones. This is made from fine silver, precious metal clay. It was made by a friend of mine. It's a magpie. It represents the trickster. A Shiva's eye from India. The eye of God. A skull carved from mammoth ivory. This is a buzzard's claw, so it pairs with the long buzzard bone. This is a reindeer toe bone. You can see actually how it's similar to the sheep's toe bone. The reindeer obviously has a slighter foot than the sheep. This is the first bone that was ever gifted to me. This is a hedgehog's jawbone, and also one of my favourite. Wolf tooth. A piece of copper that I found actually. It wasn't made by me. And the two copper pieces represent love in their different forms. This is personal love, individual love, and this is universal love. But again, I'll go into more detail about these in the individual videos. This is a little pebble, but to me it's an egg, and it represents new beginnings. A limpet shell, representing home in many different forms. And this last piece is fossilized horse tooth. Very big, very heavy, representing a horse who represents instincts. So that's the basics on how the cloth works and the bones themselves and how I read and interpret in a practical sense. But there's obviously another level to it. There's being connected into the source. The bones come from the natural world, and they speak in a waking dream language of symbolism. And we can learn those symbols as we can with tarot or with any other oracle. But there's another element to it, isn't there? There's being connected into the source that is a place of trust where you can let go of over-analysing and over-interpreting. Whenever we read any oracle, when we use a pendulum, when we do any of those kinds of things, we almost have to be focused on the question, but also kind of relaxed in a particular state. So to kind of tap into that waking dream language in a relaxed way, we have to know that the interpreting comes from our deep soul's knowing. So it's important to be connected to the place where that comes from. And there are two ways of doing this. There's being connected into our bodies, which are obviously their nature. Sometimes we think of ourselves as not being part of nature, but the most basic thing that makes us part of nature is our bodies and living in bodies. I have this phrase that I say, matter matters, and that's multifold, the meaning of that phrase, but one part of it is we live in a body, we live in a physical body, we can be as spiritual as we like, but the facts are we live in a body, and that's matter, and we have to have a relationship with it. We need to be healthy in our bodies, and we need to be connected to our bodies, and sometimes we can get into our minds too much, and that's not very good with oracle reading as well. So I tend to dance. I dance a lot, or even drumming and allowing the vibrations of the drum to move through your body, or whatever other way you might have of connecting with your body. I also do yoga, or going for a walk, or there are things like getting in touch with the senses of your body. So you might have something really nice that you like to feel, that makes you present in your body. I have some really lovely rabbit skins that are lovely to stroke, or you might have smells. I've been using the perfumes from Hagroot to really get me into my body as well, and also to connect to a scent to a particular state of mind, which you saw me anointing my bone oracle with the Bone Woman scent. So that's another way, and there's also sound, although the trouble with sound is you can still be a bit in your mind. You have to be moving to the sound, I think. So those are ways of getting into your body, and also to connect with nature, and that makes it sound again as if we're separate from nature, which we're obviously not. So it's just been raining really hard here, been listening to the rain, or stroking tree bark, smelling the scent of the soil, but being really present and really focused, and coming down into a very simple state of mind that is uncomplicated. And that gives us the freedom to interpret, but also to trust our interpretations and to go with the first thing that we see. And it's the same with scrying or crystal gazing, water, that kind of scrying, smoke scrying, any of those kinds of things. You You have to relax and get out of your own way. And that's more true with oracles like bone oracles or smudging with smoke or scrying with water, because with an oracle deck you have the pictures that remind you of the words, and it's much more logos, in the sense that you've had something explained to you as a concept. And you still have that with bone oracle because there's all the symbolism, but interpreting how the things connect together and how they relate to the question is much more about trust. And as I've said, if you're interested, we can do some readings together, and we can see if we can interpret together if you'd like a bit more help in understanding how you do that. And as I said, it's a work in progress for me as well, but I'm happy to have some companions along the way, and to show you what I've learned so far. So I hope this video was helpful and useful, and obviously, as always, if you have any questions you can ask me here on Patreon, or you can ask me through the Hecate's Helper group. And yeah, so I will begin, the next video will be the first bone. So blessings on your day, and blessings on your journeys with all your oracles.